In the bustling region of Judea, where hills rolled into valleys and olive trees dotted the landscape, a man named Judas Iscariot was chosen for a significant journey. As the son of Simon Iscariot, Judas grew up in the town of Kerioth, a place far removed from the heart of Galilean fishing villages. His life took a transformative turn when he became one of the 12 original disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus' selection of Judas seemed providential, suggesting a higher purpose for this man's life. Judas, like the other disciples, was drawn to Jesus' teachings and the promise of a new kingdom. He abandoned his former life to follow this charismatic preacher, whose words carried the power to inspire and change hearts. For Judas, the path of discipleship offered hope for personal transformation in the advent of a divine era. At first, the journey was exhilarating. Judas found himself amidst miracles and profound teachings. He marveled at Jesus' parables, which turned conventional wisdom on its head and revealed deep truths about the nature of God's kingdom. Jesus spoke of love, forgiveness, and a radical inclusiveness that welcomed sinners and outcasts. For Judas, these teachings were revolutionary, offering a vision of a world transformed by divine love and justice. Chapter 2: Treasurer of the Group. In the fellowship of the disciples, each man had a role, and Judas was entrusted with a critical responsibility. He became the treasurer. Managing the group's funds, Judas kept the money bag, collecting donations and overseeing expenses as they traveled from village to village. This role gave him a unique position of trust and influence, as well as insight into the practical workings of their mission. The treasury was modest but vital, supporting their needs and enabling them to assist the poor and needy. Judas' role as treasurer was a testament to the trust Jesus placed in him. However, this position also exposed Judas to temptation, as he held the collective resources of the group. As treasurer, Judas had to manage the logistics of their itinerant lifestyle. He negotiated with innkeepers, bought supplies, and ensured there was enough money to sustain their mission. His role required shrewdness and responsibility, skills that Judas possessed in abundance. Yet, the access to money began to awaken a latent greed within him, a subtle corruption that would grow over time. Chapter 3: Background. Judas' surname, Iscariot, indicated his origins, possibly from Kerioth, a town in Judea. This detail distinguished him from the predominantly Galilean disciples, providing a unique cultural and geographical perspective within the group. His background might have influenced his expectations and understanding of Jesus' mission. Judea was a region fraught with political tension and religious fervor, a place where the longing for a messianic deliverer was deeply felt. Judas, shaped by these currents, likely harbored strong hopes for a revolutionary change. His identity as a Judean perhaps added to the complex dynamics of his relationship with Jesus and the other disciples. Growing up in Kerioth, Judas would have been well-versed in the hopes and frustrations of his people. The Roman occupation was a constant source of tension, and many Jews yearned for a Messiah who would liberate them from oppression. Judas, with his fervent desire for freedom and justice, might have seen in Jesus the potential leader who could bring about this long-awaited change. Chapter 4: Witness to Miracles. Judas was a witness to the extraordinary miracles performed by Jesus. He saw the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers cleansed, and the dead raised. These miracles were powerful affirmations of Jesus' divine authority and messianic identity. Each act of healing and provision served as a beacon of the kingdom of God breaking into the world. Among the most memorable miracles was the feeding of the 5,000. Judas stood among the disciples as Jesus multiplied 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed a vast crowd. He also witnessed Jesus walking on water, calming storms, and exorcising demons. These miraculous signs were irrefutable evidence of divine power, reinforcing the disciples' faith and commitment. The miracles were not just displays of power, but acts of compassion that revealed the heart of Jesus' mission. Judas saw lives transformed, hope restored, and communities healed. He heard the cries of joy from those who were healed and the awe of the crowds who witnessed these wonders. Yet, despite these profound experiences, a shadow of doubt and dissatisfaction began to grow in Judas' heart. Chapter 5: Theft and Dishonesty. Despite the profound experiences and teachings, Judas struggled with his own moral weaknesses. The Gospel of John reveals that Judas was dishonest, regularly stealing from the collective funds he managed. This act of theft was a serious breach of trust, reflecting an inner conflict that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Judas' behavior was driven by a combination of greed and disillusionment. While outwardly committed to the mission, he harbored a growing sense of frustration and dissatisfaction. His petty thefts were a symptom of deeper spiritual turmoil, a conflict between his selfish desires and the selfless message preached by Jesus. Judas' dishonesty did not go unnoticed. The other disciples, though unaware of the full extent of his actions, sensed something was amiss. Jesus, with his profound insight, knew of Judas' thefts but chose not to expose him, perhaps hoping that Judas would find redemption through his own conscience. This unspoken awareness added to the tension within the group and within Judas himself. Chapter 6. Discontent with Jesus' approach. As time went on, Judas became increasingly discontent with Jesus' approach to the messianic mission. Like many Jews of his time, Judas expected the Messiah to be a political and military leader who would liberate Israel from Roman oppression. However, Jesus preached a kingdom not of this world, emphasizing love, forgiveness, and spiritual renewal over political revolution. Judas' disillusionment grew as he saw Jesus refuse opportunities to seize power or incite rebellion. Jesus' humility and focus on serving others clashed with Judas' expectations of a triumphant deliverer. This gap between expectation and reality widened, fueling Judas' internal struggle and setting the stage for his eventual betrayal. Judas was not alone in his expectations. Many Jews, including some of the disciples, hoped for a Messiah who would overthrow the Romans and restore Israel's sovereignty. Jesus' teachings on turning the other cheek, loving one's enemies, and seeking the kingdom of God through spiritual means were difficult for Judas to reconcile with his desire for tangible, political change. Chapter 7. Betrayal. The pivotal moment in Judas' life came when he decided to betray Jesus. For 30 pieces of silver, Judas agreed to identify Jesus to the chief priests and elders who sought to arrest him. This sum of money, though significant, was a paltry price for the life of the man Judas had followed for 3 years. Judas approached the religious leaders, driven by a combination of greed, disillusionment, and perhaps a desperate hope to force Jesus' hand into taking a more militant stance. The chief priests, eager to silence Jesus' growing influence, eagerly accepted Judas' offer. This act of betrayal would forever mark Judas as the archetype of treachery. The decision to betray Jesus was not made lightly. Judas wrestled with his conscience, torn between loyalty to his teacher and his growing disillusionment. The 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, symbolized his moral descent. Judas' act of betrayal was a desperate attempt to resolve his inner conflict, a tragic gamble that would lead to devastating consequences. Chapter 8. The Last Supper. During the Last Supper, Jesus and his disciples gathered to celebrate the Passover. It was a night filled with poignant teachings and intimate moments. Jesus, aware of the impending betrayal, spoke openly about his fate. He predicted that one of his disciples would betray him, causing a wave of distress among them. Jesus identified Judas as the betrayer by handing him a piece of bread dipped in the dish. This act, both a gesture of friendship and a revelation of treachery, stunned the disciples. Judas, maintaining his facade, left the supper to carry out his plan. The moment was a profound juxtaposition of loyalty and betrayal, setting the stage for the events to come. The Last Supper was a deeply significant event. Jesus instituted the practice of communion, breaking bread and sharing wine as symbols of his body and blood, to be remembered and practiced by his followers. Judas, despite his betrayal, participated in this sacred meal, a paradox that highlighted the complexity of human relationships and the depths of Jesus' forgiveness. Chapter 9. Betrayal Signal. In the Garden of Gethsemane, under the cover of night, Judas led a contingent of soldiers and officials to Jesus. He had arranged a signal with the arresting party. The man he kissed would be Jesus. This kiss, a symbol of affection and loyalty, became the mark of ultimate betrayal. As Judas approached, Jesus greeted him, fully aware of what was to come. Judas kissed Jesus, and the soldiers moved in to arrest him. This moment of betrayal was fraught with tension and sorrow, as Judas' act set into motion the chain of events leading to Jesus' crucifixion. The kiss of betrayal became one of the most infamous acts in history, a stark reminder of human frailty and deceit. The scene in Gethsemane was dramatic and filled with emotion. Jesus had been praying intensely, seeking strength for the ordeal ahead. His disciples, unaware of the gravity of the situation, struggled to stay awake. When Judas arrived with the soldiers, the peaceful garden became a place of conflict and arrest. Jesus' calm acceptance of his fate contrasted sharply with the chaos of his capture. Chapter 10. Regret and Remorse. After Jesus was condemned by the religious leaders, Judas was overcome with a profound sense of guilt and remorse. Realizing the gravity of his actions, he attempted to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. He confessed, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." However, the religious leaders callously dismissed his remorse, stating, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Judas, tormented by the weight of his guilt and the realization of his irreversible betrayal, threw the silver into the temple and departed. His regret was a poignant reflection of the human capacity for remorse and the consequences of one's actions. Judas' remorse was genuine and intense. He recognized the innocence of Jesus and the enormity of his betrayal. His attempt to return the money was a desperate bid to undo his actions, but it was too late. The religious leaders' cold response only deepened his despair. Judas' remorse was a tragic illustration of the consequences of sin and the burden of guilt. Chapter 11. Death. Haunted by his betrayal and unable to cope with his guilt, Judas chose to end his own life. The Gospel of Matthew records that he hanged himself, a tragic end to a tormented soul. The book of Acts offers a different account, describing how Judas fell headlong, his body bursting open. Both accounts honor the grim fate that befell him. Judas' death was a tragic conclusion to a life marked by inner conflict and moral failure. It served as a stark warning about the destructive power of unchecked greed and the consequences of betraying trust. His demise left a dark shadow over the narrative of Jesus' final days. The field where Judas died became known as the Field of Blood, purchased with the 30 pieces of silver he had returned. This place stood as a grim reminder of his betrayal and its consequences. Judas' end was a somber reflection on the wages of sin and the tragic cost of unrepented guilt. His death added a layer of darkness to the unfolding story of redemption and sacrifice. Chapter 12. Legacy. Judas Iscariot's name has become synonymous with betrayal and treachery. His story, preserved in the Gospels, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of disillusionment, greed, and moral compromise. Despite his proximity to Jesus and the first-hand experiences of divine miracles, Judas succumbed to his darker impulses, leaving a legacy that has resonated through centuries. In Christian tradition, Judas represents the ultimate betrayal of trust and the tragic consequences of turning away from the light. His life and actions are remembered as a solemn reminder of the human capacity for both loyalty and treachery. Judas' story, woven into the fabric of the gospel narrative, underscores the themes of forgiveness, redemption, and the profound cost of betrayal. As the shadow of Judas' actions looms large, it also highlights the contrasting themes of grace and forgiveness embodied in the life and teachings of Jesus. Through Judas' story, we are reminded of the enduring struggle between good and evil, and the importance of steadfast faith and integrity in the face of temptation and disillusionment. The legacy of Judas Iscariot is complex. On one hand, he is reviled as the archetypal traitor, his name a byword for treachery. On the other hand, his story also evokes a deep sense of pity and tragedy. Judas was a man who walked closely with Jesus, witnessed his miracles, and heard his teachings, yet fell prey to his own weaknesses. His story challenges believers to reflect on their own lives, to guard against the corrosive effects of greed and disillusionment, and to seek forgiveness and redemption. Judas' story is also a testament to the profound grace of Jesus. Despite knowing Judas' intentions, Jesus did not cast him out. He continued to offer Judas opportunities for repentance and change. This aspect of the narrative underscores the boundless nature of divine grace and the hope for redemption, even for those who have strayed far from the path. In the end, Judas Iscariot's life is a poignant reminder of the complexities of human nature and the profound impact of choices. His story, marked by moments of hope, disillusionment, betrayal, and remorse, resonates through history as a powerful testament to the themes of trust, betrayal, and the possibility of redemption.